The rain in early November doesn't just fall in Chicago. It attacks. It's a cold, stinging assault that finds every gap in your coat and every crack in your resolve. Tonight. It was turning the streets around St. Gabriel's Hospital into slick black mirrors, reflecting ambulance lights and the flickering neon of the corner bodega. My name is Nora Quinn. I'm 29 years old, and my life is a balancing act performed on a high wire made of student loan debt. By day, I'm a medical interpreter at St. Gabriel's. I'm the bridge between a doctor's sterile prognosis and a patient's raw terror. I translate cardiac arrhythmia into su corazón, no lat on ritmo. But what I'm really translating is, this is serious, but we can fight it. It requires absolute precision and a hell of a lot of compassion. By night, or more accurately, in the desperate hours between shifts, I'm a freelance forensic linguist. It sounds fancier than it is, mostly. I analyze texts for insurance companies, weirdly worded claims, suspicious emails, anonymous tips. Companies pay good money for someone who can spot the difference between a native English speaker faking poor grammar and a non-native speaker trying their best. I'm good at it. My brain just sees the patterns. I need to be good at it. The debt from my master's degree is suffocating. And my mother's heart condition, a tricky valve issue, means her co-pays are a mountain I have to climb every single month. I hate the grind. I hate being beholden to anyone, especially the kind of shadowy power that runs insurance firms and banks. But I'm a realist, and right now, realism meant analyzing a batch of vendor invoices for $100 an hour. My eyes burning under the hospital's fluorescent lights long after my interpreting shift had ended. It was late, maybe midnight, when I finally pushed open the heavy glass doors of the main entrance. The rain had picked up again, a steady, miserable drumming. I pulled the collar of my thin coat tighter, my mind already calculating. If I ran, I could catch the 12:40 a.m. bus. If I missed it, I'd have to splurge on a ride share, and there went $20 I'd earmarked for the electric bill. I was halfway across the hospital's semicircular driveway, heading for the crosswalk, when he stepped out. He came from the covered entrance, moving fast, head down, a phone pressed to his ear. He was wearing a gray suit, even in the gloom. I could tell it was expensive, the kind of suit that costs more than my car. It fit him like a second skin. He wasn't paying attention to anything, just listening intently to his call, his brow furrowed. He stepped right off the curb into the street, his back to the intersection. I saw the light. It was red, solid red. I heard the engine. It wasn't the sound of a car slowing down. It was the high-pitched whine of a heavy diesel engine accelerating. I looked left. A massive semi-truck, no trailer, just the cab, was blowing through the red light. It was aiming straight for the man in the gray suit. There was no time to weigh options, no time to analyze, just pure animal instinct, the same part of me that makes me reach for a falling patient. "Look out!" I screamed. Why, he didn't hear me. Or maybe he did, but he only half turned, confused. It wasn't enough. I covered the 3, maybe 4, steps between us in a dead sprint. I didn't try to grab him. I just launched myself, slamming my shoulder into the solid wall of his side. It was like hitting granite, but he was off balance. He grunted a sharp exhalation of surprise, and we went down in a tangled heap on the wet asphalt. I hit the ground first, and I hit it hard. The world dissolved into a cacophony of sensation. The jarring impact rattled my teeth. My left wrist, already aching from hours of typing my linguistic report, twisted underneath me with a sickening, wet pop. Pain, white-hot and absolute, shot up my arm. My right knee scraped across the pavement, shredding my jeans and the skin beneath. Then came the truck. It was a physical presence, a roar of displaced air, and the overpowering stench of diesel and burnt rubber. It thundered past the exact spot where the man had been standing, so close that I felt the vibration rattle in my chest. The hot, wet wind of its passage tore at my hair. It didn't slow, it didn't stop. It just blasted down Harrison Street and vanished into the rain. For a second, there was only silence, broken by my own ragged gasping. Adrenaline sang in my veins, making the rainy street feel impossibly bright, impossibly real. "Are you okay?" I choked out, pushing myself up onto my one good elbow. My knee was on fire, and I could feel the warm blood soaking through my torn jeans. My wrist was a universe of throbbing pain. The man was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. He was staring at the empty street where the truck had been. Yes, he said. His voice was deep, laced with a faint, unplaceable accent, like expensive gravel. He turned to look at me, and his eyes, they weren't grateful. Not yet. They were assessing, sharp and dangerously intelligent, even in his shock. He was maybe 35, handsome in a severe, carved-from-marble way. Before I could say another word, the world erupted. 2 black SUVs, the kind you see in movies about presidents, materialized from the darkness. They weren't parked. They just arrived, mounting the curb, their high beams flooding us like a stage. Doors flew open, and 4, maybe 5, men in dark, identical suits piled out. They didn't run. They moved, a single, fluid unit, hands inside their jackets, fanning out, securing the area. It was military. It was terrifying. "Boss, are you hit?" one of them yelled, his gaze sweeping over us, over the empty street, the hospital, the rooftops. Boss. The word hung in the cold, wet air. This wasn't a stockbroker. This wasn't a hospital administrator. The man I had just saved the boss held up one hand. It was a simple, economical gesture, but it stopped all 5 men in their tracks. They froze, poised for violence, waiting. "I'm fine, Franco," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. He got to his feet with a fluid grace, brushing bits of asphalt from the sleeve of his perfect, ruined suit. He looked down at me, still a heap of pain on the pavement, clutching my screaming wrist. His expression shifted, the shock hardening into something I couldn't read. Calculation. "You're bleeding," he stated. He extended a hand to help me up. I ignored it. I don't like being told what to do, and I really don't like being in the debt of shadowy power. "I'm fine," I lied, gritting my teeth as I pushed myself to my knees. My knee! The man he'd called Franco, who looked older, tougher, with eyes that had seen everything, was already barking orders. He spoke in rapid Italian. One of the younger men sprinted toward the corner the truck had come from. "We're moving, boss," Franco said, his voice a low, urgent command. "Not yet." The boss's eyes were still locked on me. "She needs a doctor." "We are at a hospital," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "I just left my shift. I'll go back to the ER." "No," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. The young guard who had run off came sprinting back, his shoes splashing in the puddles. He was holding a small, dark object. "Boss, Franco," he panted, holding it up for them to see. "Found it by the sewer grate. It's a fitting from a brake line." He turned it over. "It's been sheared, cut clean." The man who had been checking the intersection jogged back. No skid marks, Franco, none. He didn't even tap the brakes. The air pressure dropped. The cold rain suddenly felt like ice. Cut clean? This wasn't a drunk driver. This wasn't a terrible accident. This was a hit, an assassination attempt. And Nora Quinn, the forensic linguist who was $20,000 behind on her student loans, had just thrown myself in front of it. My stomach hollowed out. The boss looked at Franco. A silent conversation passed between them. Then he turned his full attention back to me. The authority coming off him was a tangible thing, a heavy blanket that smothered the air. "Ms. Quinn," I whispered. "Nora Quinn." "Miss Quinn, you are injured because you intervened on my behalf. You will not be going to the St. Gabriel's emergency room." "I really think I should. I work here. They'll take care of me." "They ask questions," Franco cut in, his voice flat. "They file police reports. The truck is gone, but the attempt becomes public record. We don't like public records." The boss, Luca Moretti, though I wouldn't learn his name for another 5 minutes, stepped closer. "You will be coming with me," he said. "My personal physician will examine you." My shadowy power alarm wasn't just ringing, it was a 5-alarm fire. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Moretti, Luca Moretti. The name was just a name, Italian-American, but the way he said it, the way Franco and the others deferred to him, this was a man whose name was a key, or a weapon. Mr. Moretti, I appreciate it, but I can take care of myself. I just need to go back inside. I tried to stand, putting weight on my right leg. The moment my foot settled, my knee buckled, and a jolt of agony shot straight up my spine. I cried out, pitching forward. Before I could hit the pavement a second time, he was there. He caught me, one arm locking around my waist like a steel band, the other steadying my shoulder. His grip was incredible. He pulled me upright against his chest, holding my weight effortlessly. For one dizzying second, my face was buried in his suit. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and something sharp and metallic, like ozone or a struck match. That was not a request. Miss Quinn, he said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble right by my ear that sent a shiver through me, and it had nothing to do with the cold. You were just seen saving my life, which means you were also seen by whoever was watching, whoever sent that truck. He eased his grip slightly but didn't let go. You are now a witness. Worse, you are a complication. They don't know who you are, but they know you were here. They cannot and will not allow for complications. He straightened, his arm still securely around my waist, taking most of my weight as I balanced on my one good leg. You require medical attention, one he said, as if concluding a business deal. And until I understand the nature of this threat, you require temporary safety. You will have both. He didn't wait for my answer. He nodded at Franco. Get her in the car, gently. Wait, I protested, but my voice was thin. Shock was setting in, making the world feel like it was tilting. My bag, my phone, I have to call my mother. One of the young, silent guards had already retrieved my worn canvas messenger bag from the pavement. Franco opened the rear door of the lead SUV, and the warm yellow light of the interior spilled out. I can't just go with you. My mother, she'll be worried. I have work. Your phone will be returned to you once we are secure, Luca Moretti said, his arm guiding me, half lifting me, into the impossibly plush leather interior. It smelled like new carpet and old money. He slid in beside me, his presence taking up all the air in the cabin. The door shut with a heavy, final thud. It didn't sound like a car door. It sounded like a vault. Franco got in the passenger seat. The other men vanished into the second SUV. The vehicles pulled away from the curb, as silent and smooth as predators. I looked back through the tinted window at St. Gabriel's, its familiar lights blurring in the rain. My life, my hard, predictable, debt-ridden life just disappeared in the rearview mirror. I was in a moving fortress, sitting shoulder to shoulder with a man who was the target of a professional hit, a man called Boss. In the front seat, Franco's phone vibrated. He answered it, listened, and then spoke in that same low, rapid Italian. I'm fluent in Spanish and ASL, not Italian, but I didn't need to be. I caught the cognate camera, and I knew his tone. He hung up and his eyes met mine in the rearview mirror for a fraction of a second. They were cold. He turned to Luca. He spoke in Italian, his voice tight with a new urgency. Qualcuno sta dando la caccia al boss, Franco said. He glanced at me again, a quick, dismissive flick of his eyes. E la ragazza potrebbe essere finita nell'inquadratura delle telecamere. My blood turned to slush. I didn't need a translator for that. I heard boss. I heard telecamere. Someone is hunting the boss, and the girl might have been in the frame. I wasn't just a complication, I was evidence. And in the world I had just fallen into, evidence gets erased. I turned to the man beside me, Luca Moretti, and he was staring straight ahead, his handsome profile unreadable in the passing city lights. Where are you taking me? I whispered. He turned his head, his dark eyes locked onto mine, and there was no warmth in them at all. Just the cold, hard certainty of power. Somewhere safe, and he said, And I, Nora Quinn, the woman who lived by precision and accuracy, had the terrifying realization that I had no idea what that word meant anymore. I woke up to the smell of expensive soap and the unnatural quiet of a room without sirens. My first thought was that I was dead. My second was that the afterlife had surprisingly high thread count sheets. I was in a bedroom, not a hospital room. The walls were a calm, neutral gray. The furniture was dark, heavy wood, and the only light came from a sliver of gray Chicago sky visible through thick floor-to-ceiling windows. I was in a high-rise, a very, very expensive high-rise. My body ached. I moved, and a sharp, articulate pain shot from my left wrist. I looked down. My arm was resting on a pillow, my wrist expertly wrapped in a compression bandage, supported by a splint. My right leg was similarly propped, my knee cleaned and dressed with a professional-grade medical bandage that covered the shredded remains of my jeans. Someone had cut the fabric away. My clothes were gone. I was wearing a soft silk pajama set that felt like water against my skin. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the groggy painkillers. "She's awake." A man I didn't recognize stood in the doorway. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and a kind, tired face. He wore a crisp blue button-down and carried a small leather bag. A doctor, not a hospital doctor. "Where am I?" My voice was a croak. "You're in a private residence. My name is Doctor Elias. I've cleaned and bandaged your knee. It was a nasty scrape, but it won't require stitches. Your wrist, however, is a different story. You have a severe sprain, maybe a hairline fracture. I'd need an X-ray to be certain, which we can arrange, but for now, I've immobilized it." He checked my pulse, his fingers light and practiced. His calm was almost as unsettling as the men in suits. "Who are you?" I tried again. "I'm Mr. Moretti's personal physician." He said it like he was announcing his specialty. "I've given you a mild analgesic for the pain and inflammation. You'll be sore for a few days." He snapped his bag shut. "Your personal effects are on the nightstand." He nodded, and just like that, he was gone, the door closing with a soft, heavy click. I turned my head. There it was, my worn messenger bag and my phone. I snatched it with my good hand. The screen lit up. 12:17 in the afternoon. I'd been out for nearly 12 hours. And I had 16 missed calls. 8 from my mother, 5 from my best friend, Ava, 3 from the hospital's staffing coordinator, probably wondering why I hadn't confirmed my next shift. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mother, her heart condition if she got this worked up, if she thought something had happened to me. I was dialing her number when the door opened again. This time it was Luca Moretti. He'd changed. He was no longer in the ruined gray suit. He wore dark trousers and a simple, perfectly fitted black cashmere sweater. No bodyguards. He looked less like a mob boss and more like a high-powered CEO. He held 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "I see you're awake," and he said. He placed one of the cups on the nightstand near me. "I thought you might need this." I stared at him, my thumb hovering over the call button. "I have 16 missed calls. Mr. Moretti. 8 from my mother. She has a heart condition. I have to call her right now." "I understand you," he said, his voice quiet. "But I need you to listen to me for 1 minute before you do. Please. You have no right to keep me here. You can't just kidnap me because I pulled you out of the street." "I am not kidnapping you. Miss Quinn, I am protecting you." He took a sip from his own cup, his eyes never leaving mine. They were dark and held an exhaustion that matched the doctor's. "I apologize for the inconvenience, for the fright. It will be for a few days, at most, until we understand the situation and can guarantee your safety." "A few days," I laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "I can't just disappear for a few days. I have a job. I have a mother who relies on me. I'm leaving right now." I threw the blankets off, the silk pooling at my waist. The pain in my knee was a dull, angry fire. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and immediately winced, my head spinning. That truck," he said, his voice flat, stopping me cold. "It wasn't an accident." "I know that," I snapped. clutching my splinted wrist. "I heard your men. The brake line, and that's your problem, Mr. Moretti. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you now." He pulled a tablet from under his arm, tapped the screen, and held it out. "This is from a traffic camera 2 blocks down, pointed at the hospital intersection." He pressed play. I saw the grainy, black and white footage. I saw the hospital entrance. I saw him step off the curb, phone to his ear. I saw my own small figure, running, a blur of motion. And I saw the truck. It wasn't just speeding. As my digital self slammed into Luca, sending us both sprawling, the truck's front wheels turned. It was a sharp, deliberate correction, a swerve toward us, aiming for the spot where we had fallen. It was only our momentum, rolling us that extra foot or two, that saved us from being crushed. I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach twisted. He hadn't just been aiming for Luca. He had been aiming for us. "The driver was correcting his aim," Luca said softly, stating the obvious. "He was trying to finish the job. Both of us." I sank back against the pillows. Oh, God. "You are a public witness to an attempted murder," he said, putting the tablet away. "My murder. You are a loose end, and the people I am dealing with do not tolerate loose ends. They will find out who you are. They will find your apartment. They will find your mother." His last words hit me like a physical blow. "So you see," while he continued, "you can't leave. Not yet." I hated him for it. I hated his calm, his logic, his cashmere sweater, and the impossible, dangerous world he had just dragged me into. But he was right. The image of that truck's wheels turning. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. 72 hours. That's all I'm asking. 3 days. Give my people time to identify the threat and neutralize it. After that, you can go back to your life. I give you my word. 72 hours. An eternity. My mother. "We'll handle it. We'll set up a secure line. You can call her. Tell her you've been called away on an emergency translating gig, a private client, non-disclosure agreement, something she'll believe." The door opened again, and this time it was Franco DeSantis, the man from the street. He looked agitated, his jaw tight. He ignored me completely. "Boss, we have a problem," he said, switching to English for my benefit. I presumed. "Those vendor invoices from Covenant LLC, the ones Anthony flagged, they're not just weird, they're draining us. Another 50 grand moved this morning." Luca's face hardened. "What did Anthony say?" "He says the paperwork is fine, but the descriptions, they're bizarre. Services rendered for logistic finality. Consultation on asset mobilization. It's English, but it's wrong." My head snapped up. It was an instinct I couldn't control. "What's wrong with it?" I asked. Franco finally looked at me. His eyes narrowed in annoyance. "What?" "The descriptions. What's wrong with them?" I repeated, sitting up straighter. "They're, I don't know, stiff, like a computer wrote them." "Not a computer," and I said, the forensic linguist in my brain taking over. A non-native speaker, someone trying to sound overtly formal. Logistic finality isn't standard business English. It's a direct translation, probably from a Romance language, like Italian or Spanish. Both men stared at me. Before either could respond, the door opened a third time. The man who entered was a peacock. Where Luca was understated, this man was all flash. He wore a razor-sharp suit, but in a loud pinstripe, a gold watch that practically glittered in the dim light. His hair was slicked back, and a brilliant, insincere smile was plastered on his face. He looked to be about Luca's age, but he moved with a nervous, electric energy. "Luca, cousin," he boomed, spreading his arms. I came as soon as I heard, "My God. Are you all right, Franco? You let this happen." Franco's expression turned to stone. "I'm fine, Marco," Luca said, his voice dropping a degree. The man Marco finally seemed to notice me. His smile faltered for a half second, then widened, becoming something else, something greasy. His eyes, I saw, were cold, colder than Luca's, colder than Franco's. They were flat, dead. He swept his gaze over me, from my bandaged wrist to my bare, bandaged knee visible below the hem of the pajama shorts. It wasn't an assessment. It was an appraisal, like I was a piece of art, or a horse, or something else to be bought. "And who," he purred, "is this?" "This is Nora Quinn," Luca said, stepping slightly, a small, almost imperceptible movement that put him partially between us. "She was with me at the time." A witness," Marco said, as if the word tasted bad. "Well, we're all very grateful." His cold eyes flicked back to Luca. "But a woman, cousin, in a safe suite, it makes you look soft. People are already talking. This business, it requires a hard hand, you know?" "Thank you for your concern, Marco," Luca said, his voice dangerously smooth. "Franco will see you out." Marco's smile twitched. He gave me one last lingering look, a look that made my skin crawl. "Of course, boss. Just be careful. It's a dangerous world, for everyone involved." He left, and the expensive scent of his cologne hung in the air, thick and cloying. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That man, he was everything I hated about shadowy power, concentrated into one person. "He's your cousin?" I asked. "Family is complicated," Luca said stiffly. He turned to Franco. "Get Anthony up here, and bring me those invoices." Franco nodded and left. I looked at Luca, the image of the truck, the cold-eyed cousin, the mysterious, draining invoices. I was trapped in the middle of a war I didn't understand. "You said 72 hours, I said, my voice shaking less now. Anger was replacing the fear. "I did. If I'm stuck here, I'm not going to be useless." The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. He raised an eyebrow. "The invoices," I said, pointing with my good hand. "The ones written by a non-native speaker. That's what I do. I'm a forensic linguist. I analyze documents. I find patterns. I can tell you if all those weird invoices were written by the same person." Luca was silent for a long time. He studied me, his gaze intense, as if he was recalculating a very complex equation. "Why would you help me?" he asked. "Because I don't like him," I said, nodding toward the door where Marco had left. "And because the sooner you neutralize this threat, the sooner I can go home to my mother. And I don't like being a victim. I'm not one." A flicker of something respect surprise passed through his eyes. But before he could agree, he asked a question I wasn't expecting. "Your mother, her heart condition, what is it?" I was taken aback. "Mitral valve prolapse. It's manageable, but she needs her medication, beta blockers and a blood thinner. Without them." "What's the prescription and the pharmacy?" I told him. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and spoke in low, rapid Italian. He listed her medications, her name, the pharmacy address, and then un'ora. 1 hour. He hung up. "The prescriptions will be delivered to her door in 1 hour. I'm also posting a 2-man security detail on her building. They're discreet. Former plainclothes, they'll look like they're reading the paper. She won't know they're there, but no one will get in or out of that building without them knowing." My breath hitched. This was a side of him I hadn't seen. Not the cold boss, but a man of precision, of action, a man who understood leverage and care. "Thank you," I whispered. "You can call her now," he said, nodding to my phone. "Use the speaker. We'll set up the secure line after." My call to Mom was a masterpiece of half-truths. I was on a high-paying, last-minute assignment, a legal deposition. Yes, a non-disclosure agreement. No, I couldn't say where. Yes, I was safe. Yes, I loved her. By the time I hung up, my good hand was shaking. Just as I did, Franco's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face went white. He looked at Luca. "Boss, there was an explosion in your private garage at the townhouse, your Bentley." Luca's face didn't change, but the air around him went arctic. "I'm not in my Bentley. I took the SUV." "I know, boss, but the bomb was set on a timer to go off at 1 p.m. The system logs show someone used your personal garage code at 3:07 this morning. It was an internal code. 3:07 in the morning, while I was unconscious, while we were in transit. The truck wasn't the only attempt. It was just the first. The threat wasn't just outside. It was inside. Someone in his own organization, someone with his personal codes, had just tried to blow him to pieces. Luca looked at Franco, then at me. His jaw was set like iron. "Get me those invoices." "Franco," he said, his voice a low, lethal growl. "All of them, and get Miss Quinn a laptop with a secure connection to our server." He turned to me, the brief flash of humanity gone, replaced by the boss. "You wanted to work. Miss Quinn, you just got your chance." Franco dropped a stack of files on the bed and handed me a slim, heavy laptop. I opened it, scanned documents, spreadsheets, wire transfer confirmations. I started with the file Franco had mentioned, Covenant LLC, then another C, OMVENANT. LLC. A legal distinction without a difference, meant to confuse. Then I found 4 more, all with similar consulting descriptions. They were all the same. The author was consistent. Why, they overused the definite article. They used dot punctuation in their abbreviations, a European, not American habit. They structured their clauses in a subject-object-verb order when describing complex actions. It wasn't just one person. It was one person disguising their writing, but they were making the same mistakes over and over. "It's one author," I said, my heart pounding with the thrill of the hunt. 6 different shell companies, one author. And they're not just moving money. They're trying to cover their tracks by creating a fake paper trail, and they're not as smart as they think they are. Luca Moretti watched me, his expression unreadable. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was the only one who could read the writing on the wall. And I had just 72 hours to do it. My 72 hours were ticking away in the most expensive prison in Chicago. The safe suite was beautiful, all glass and steel overlooking the Gray River, but it was still a cage. The only link I had to my old life was the secure, untraceable phone Luca had provided. On the second day, I used it to call Ava. It was a mistake. "Nora, oh my God, Nora, where are you?" Her voice was a mix of pure terror and sharp anger. "I've been calling. Your mom's been calling me. I went by your apartment. Your car is still there. Are you okay?" "Ava, I'm fine. I'm safe. I can't talk right now." "You can't talk? What the hell does that mean? The hospital said you left your shift and just vanished. People are talking about filing a missing persons report." "No, don't. Please, Ava, listen to me," I said, my voice low, conscious of the guard, a man built like a refrigerator, standing just outside the living room door. "I'm on a high-priority assignment, a security issue. There's a non-disclosure agreement. It's complicated." There was a dead, cold silence on the other end. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone. "A non-disclosure agreement. Nora, what did you get yourself into? This isn't one of your little insurance gigs, is it? You sound scared." "I'm not scared. I'm just busy. I'll be back in a couple of days. I promise. Just please trust me. And check on my mom. Tell her the assignment is going well." "Trust you?" she scoffed. "You vanish off the face of the earth, give me some corporate spy nonsense, and ask me to lie to your mother. Something is very wrong, Nora, and I'm angry. I'm really, really angry that you think I'm this stupid." "Ava, please. Just call me when you're done playing James Bond." She snapped, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone, a cold dread settling in my stomach that had nothing to do with Luca Moretti or his enemies. I was officially cut off. The last anchor to my normal life had just been severed, and it was my own lie that had done it. I threw myself back into the work. It was the only thing that felt real. Later that day, Luca and Franco brought in the accountant. His name was Anthony Ricci. He was a small, neat man in his late 40s, with a receding hairline and a constant film of sweat on his upper lip. He clutched a leather satchel to his chest like a shield. "Miss Quinn, this is Anthony, our head of accounts," Luca said, his voice neutral. We were in the suite's large study, the laptop open between us on a massive mahogany desk. "Anthony, Miss, Quinn is a forensic linguistics consultant," Franco added, his voice hard. "She's been reviewing the vendor invoices, the ones you flagged." "Flagged?" Anthony squeaked, his eyes darting between them and landing on me. I just said they were unusual. The system verified the routing numbers, the payments where they were valid. The payments are valid, I agreed, keeping my voice calm, the way I would with a frightened patient. But the language isn't. I turned the laptop screen toward him. I've analyzed all 6 shell company invoices. Covenant LLC, C-O-V-E-N-A-T. LLC, Red Star Logistics, all of them. They were all written by one person, a person who is not a native English speaker but is trying to sound like one. That's impossible, Anthony stammered, wiping his palms on his trousers. They're just invoices. Are they? I clicked to a new screen, showing 2 documents side by side. This one from Covenant LLC uses a comma before the conjunction and in a simple series. This one, from Red Star, doesn't. This one uses dot periods in LOLORC. This one doesn't. This is called code switching, trying to vary your style to appear to be 2 different people. But the author's tells are consistent. The overuse of for the purpose of, the subject-object-verb structure in compound sentences, it's the same person. Someone is faking these documents. Anthony. Someone inside. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. But the most interesting part was the first 2, Covenant LLC versus C-O-V-E-N-A-N-T LLC. As I said the names, Anthony did exactly what I expected him to do. He flinched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible spasm of his left eyelid, but it was there. He knew. Just a legal distinction, he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. Typo. It's not a typo, I said gently. It's a test. The first invoice was a test. The second was the real one. Whoever did this was testing the system to see if a small variation would pass your audit protocols. You must have approved both. Why? I get hundreds of these. I must have missed it. He was sweating freely now, his face pale. You missed a $50,000 transfer. Franco's voice was like ice. It was a busy day. Anthony was pleading now. I'll double check. I'll run a new audit. I can fix this. See that you do, Luca said, his voice dangerously quiet. You're dismissed. Anthony practically ran from the room. He's lying, I said, the moment the door shut. I know, Luca said, and he's terrified, which means he's not the one in charge. He's just the key. That evening, the atmosphere in the suite grew thick with tension. 3 other men arrived, men who looked like Franco, hard, quiet, and dressed in dark suits. Luca called it a council dinner, but there was no food. It was a meeting of his top lieutenants, his captains. And then he arrived, Marco Moretti. He sauntered in, all pinstripes and cologne, that dead-eyed smile firmly in place. He stopped short when he saw me sitting on the sofa, nursing my sore wrist. Well, well, he said, his voice booming in the quiet room, bringing the entertainment to the business meeting. Cousin, that's a new move, even for you. Luca didn't look up from the file he was reading. Nora Quinn is a consultant. She's here at my request. A consultant, Marco mused, walking around the sofa to stand over me. I had to crane my neck to look at him. He was appraising me again. A consultant on what exactly? Because I'm not sure her expertise is what this family needs right now. Her expertise is the only reason we know the system is bleeding, Franco cut in, his voice sharp. Ah, the invoices, Marco said, waving a dismissive hand. A small accounting error. Anthony Ritchie is getting old, sloppy. But you, Luca, you're getting sloppy too. He turned his full attention to his cousin. People are talking. First, you almost get flattened by a truck in broad daylight. Then you go to ground, which looks like you're running. And now you're holed up in a safe suite with a woman. It makes you look weak. Cousin, it makes you look soft. My breath caught. It was a direct, blatant challenge. The other 3 captains just watched, their faces like stone masks. They were judging. They were weighing. Lucas slowly closed the file. He stood up. He was a few inches shorter than Marco, but he seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. My softness, as you call it, Luca said, his voice a low, polite murmur, "is why I'm still standing. My softness is what found the leak you all missed. Be careful, Marco, that your hardness doesn't make you overstep." The smile on Marco's face tightened. The two men stared at each other for a long, vibrating second. Franco watched them, his hand perfectly still at his side, just observing. He was assessing loyalties. I realized he was watching the other captains to see whose eyes flickered. Marco broke the silence first. He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Just looking out for you. Boss, family first, right?" He clapped Luca on the shoulder, a gesture that was more of a blow, and turned to the conference table. The meeting began, and I was forgotten, but I watched them, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that Marco was the one. Hours later, they were gone. The suite was quiet again. Luca stood by the window, staring down at the river, his entire body rigid with a controlled fury. "That captain," Franco said, entering the room. "The one from the docks, Bivona. He was seen leaving Marco's club an hour before the meeting." Luca nodded once. "He's loyal to Marco." "He's a problem." "Then solve it," Luca said, his voice flat. Franco nodded and left. I didn't know what solve it meant, and I didn't want to. I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking. Oh, this was their world. The violence, the posturing, the unspoken threats. I heard the suite door open and close. I heard muffled, angry voices from the foyer, a sharp sound, like a fist hitting a wall, and then a heavier thud, a grunt of pain. It wasn't gunfire. It was a disciplinary action. It was brutal and quick. Silence. When Luca walked back into the living room, he was alone. His suit jacket was off, his tie was gone, and he was breathing hard. He walked straight to the wet bar, his right hand wrapped in a handkerchief that was already spotting with red. He poured a glass of water with his left hand, his right hand resting on the marble counter. He fumbled with a cabinet, looking for a first aid kit. "Let me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He froze, as if just remembering I was there. "I'm a medical interpreter. Remember, I've spent half my life in ERs. I know how to clean a wound." He stared at me, his chest rising and falling. The adrenaline was still pumping through him, making his eyes bright and dangerous. He looked at his hand, then back at me. He gave a short, sharp nod. I found the kit and guided him to the sofa. "Sit." He sat. I pulled up a small stool, my bad knee twinging in protest. I gently unwrapped the handkerchief. His knuckles were raw and split open. He hadn't hit a wall. He had hit a person. I worked in silence, my hands clinical and steady. Even though my heart was hammering, I cleaned the abrasions with an antiseptic wipe. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, but didn't pull away. "You have to be careful with this," I murmured, my voice all business. "Hands are a dirty place. You could get an infection." "I'll live," he said, his voice rough. I focused on my work, applying ointment, cutting strips of gauze. His hand was large, warm, and scarred. I could feel the power in it, even as it lay still in my own. I wrapped the gauze, my fingers brushing his palm, his wrist. The air in the room changed. The silence, which had been tense, was now charged. It was just the two of us. The adrenaline from his fight and the fear from my phone call had stripped us both raw. He was watching my face, not my hands. I could feel his gaze like a physical touch. I kept my eyes down, focused on the wrap, but I was aware of everything. The way his breathing had deepened, the clean, masculine scent of his skin beneath the lingering metallic tang of exertion. I secured the bandage, my fingers lingering for a fraction of a second too long on his wrist. "There, you should ice it." I looked up. His eyes were locked on mine. The fury was gone, replaced by something else, something raw and vulnerable and hot. It was a silent acknowledgement, an attraction that had been simmering under the surface since he'd pulled me into the SUV, and it was suddenly, terrifyingly, obvious to both of us. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, and in that look, I saw the man, not the boss. A man carrying an impossible weight, a man who had just been betrayed, a man who was just as trapped as I was. I broke the gaze first, pulling my hands back. I should check on the data. I stood up, my good knee wobbling. The spell was broken. The next morning, Franco brought Anthony Ricci back. This time, he didn't look nervous. He looked broken. Franco put a hand on his shoulder. "Anthony, talk to her. Tell her what you told me." Franco left us alone. Anthony Ricci sat down, his hands trembling. It was gambling," he whispered, staring at the floor. "I got in deep with a bookie, a few grand. Then it was 50,000. I was going to lose my house, my wife." "The bookie," I said softly. "He worked for Marco." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Marco found out. He paid it, all of it, and then he owned me. He didn't threaten me. He threatened my kids. He had pictures of my daughter at her bus stop." He was sobbing now, a quiet, broken sound. "He just needed my access, my admin codes. He made me authenticate the vendor accounts, Covenant, all of them. He said it was just to move some money around. I didn't know, I swear. I didn't know about the truck or the bomb. I was trying to protect my family. He was the key, just as Luca had said, the flaw in the system. With his codes and his confession, I didn't just have a pattern. I had a digital highway. I spent the next 6 hours tracing the transfers. The money didn't just move, it teleported. From Covenant LLC to a shell in Delaware. From Delaware to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. And then I found it. A branch, a single, small transfer, just $30,000 from the Cayman account back to a UES. Entity, a small, nondescript trucking company based in Gary, Indiana. The line item just said Expedited Transport Services. I ran the name through a public records search. My blood went cold. It was the same company that had leased the truck cab that tried to run us down. I printed the screen. I walked into the study where Luca and Franco were mapping out security routes. I slapped the paper down on the desk. "There," I said, my voice shaking. "There's your proof. The money that left your system paid for the truck that tried to kill you. It's all Marco." Luca stared at the paper, his face grim. "He's not just stealing. He's funding a war." "And that's where I stop," I said, holding up my good hand. The adrenaline of the discovery was wearing off, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "What do you mean?" Luca asked, standing up. "I mean, I'm done. This is my boundary. Luca, I told you I analyzed documents. I did. I found the link. No, I found your traitor. But I will not be involved in what comes next. I won't be accessory to solving it. I will advise on your legal businesses. I will help you find the flaws in your clean contracts. But I will not touch this. The violence, the hits, that is your world, not mine." We stared at each other. I was drawing a line in the sand, not just for him, but for myself. I would not become a part of this. He held my gaze, and I saw that flicker of respect again. "Your condition is noted, Miss Quinn, and it is accepted." As if on cue, Franco's secure phone buzzed. He answered it, listened, and his face went rigid. "Put it on speaker," Luca commanded. Franco tapped the phone. A tinny, rushed voice filled the room. "Boss, it's confirmed. Marco met them. 2 of them at the docks 2 hours ago." "Met who?" Luca's voice was sharp. "The cartel, the Reynosa cartel. He's asking for their support. He's offering them 3 of your port routes. And boss, he's offering them the full security schedule for the next month." The room went absolutely silent. This wasn't just a simple internal betrayal anymore. This wasn't just skimming. Marco was trying to seize control by selling out the entire Moretti operation to a Mexican cartel, and he was lighting the whole house on fire just so he could be king of the ashes. My 72 hours were almost up, but I knew, looking at the hard, cold fury in Luca Moretti's eyes, that I wasn't going anywhere. The news of Marco's meeting with the cartel hung in the air, thick and toxic, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. My 72 hours had expired, but time was no longer relevant. We weren't waiting for a clock to run out. We were waiting for the bomb to explode. It happened at 2:15 in the morning. I had been staring at the laptop, cross-referencing the trucking company's lease agreements, my eyes burning with exhaustion. Luca was in the study with Franco and 2 other guards, their voices a low, urgent murmur. The first sound wasn't a gunshot, it was a thump, a deep, concussive impact from the southeast corner of the building, heavy enough to rattle the reinforced glass in the windows. Then the power died. The entire suite plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. The only light was the red glow of a backup power indicator on the wall. The silence that followed the thump was heavier, more terrifying than the noise itself. Franco Luca's voice cut through the blackness, not a shout, but a blade. The door to my room flew open, revealing the dark silhouette of Franco DeSantis. "Nora, now, move." He didn't wait for me. He grabbed my good arm and hauled me off the bed. My bad knee screamed. My splinted wrist slammed against the doorframe, but I didn't make a sound. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my system. "What's happening?" I whispered, scrambling to keep up. "Containment breach, southeast stairwell." He was pulling me down a short, dark hall I hadn't seen before. An alarm, high-pitched and frantic, suddenly blared to life. But it wasn't a fire alarm. It was a rhythmic, digital shriek. "They're inside the building," Franco said, his voice flat. He shoved a heavy, insulated door. "Get in." He pushed me into a space no bigger than a walk-in closet, all brushed steel and no windows, a panic room. The door shut behind us with the heavy, oiled thud of a bank vault. The alarm was instantly muffled, reduced to a dull irritation. The room's emergency lights flickered on, bathing us in a sterile white glow. "Where's Luca?" I gasped, my back against the cold steel. "Doing his job?" Franco was already at a panel, flipping switches. A bank of monitors high on the wall crackled to life, but they were all static. Black screens with white text system offline. "They're not just in," Franco growled, his hand balling into a fist. "They're in the system." "What does that mean?" "It means they didn't just break the lock. They had the key." He looked at the main monitor. They used an admin code. The system was bypassed from the inside at 2 hours ago. 2 hours. "Anthony," I breathed. "It had to be." The first muffled pop, pop, pop of gunfire echoed through the walls. It was distant, but it was unmistakable. Franco drew his weapon, a sleek black pistol, and checked the magazine. The sound of him chambering around was the loudest thing in the room. He turned to me, his eyes dead. "Stay here. Do not open this door, for anyone." "Where are you going?" "To help my boss." He was gone, the heavy door sealing me in. I was alone, in a steel box, listening to the muffled sounds of a war. I could hear them, faint vibrations through the floor, shouts, the heavy, resonant boom of a different kind of weapon. And then, closer, I heard Luca's voice. He wasn't shouting like in the movies. He was commanding. Short, sharp barks. "Flank left, pin them now." He was a field commander, and this was his battlefield. I backed against the wall, my heart trying to escape my chest. I felt useless. I felt weak. The exact thing Marco called me. I slid down the wall, my bandaged knee throbbing. My eyes landed on a black case in the corner. It was a rugged, military-spec Pelican case. I opened it. Inside was a laptop, thick and heavy, with a dedicated satellite uplink, an offline backup, the system's black box. My hands, the good one shaking, pulled it out. If they used Anthony's code, they were in the server, but they might not have thought to wipe the offline mirror. I powered it on. The interface was text-based. No pretty graphics, just a command line. I had Anthony's admin credentials from my earlier work. I typed them in. Access granted. I wasn't a hacker, but I was a linguist. I didn't look for code. I looked for communication. I dove into the internal email server, the logs from the past 48 hours. Most of it was encrypted, but not all of it. Not the drafts folder. Anthony's drafts, he'd been careless or terrified. There was a chain of them, emails addressed to an untraceable, encrypted provider, but he'd written them and rewritten them, sweating over the wording. They were updates. He's in Suite 21. Southeast access is weakest. The override code I gave you is good for 4 hours. And then I saw the replies. The sender was just a string of numbers, but the text was Marco. My heart stopped. It was him. It was the same linguistic fingerprint from the invoices, but with a new, terrifying flavor. The structure was basic, clearly filtered through someone else, but the flourishes were his. Where the invoices had tried to be formal, these were sloppy, angry. He used Spanish phrases, but they were badly spelled. Vamanos instead of vamonos. He was clearly communicating with the cartel contacts. He used Spanish syntax, putting the adjective after the noun in English in a way that was unnatural. Get the woman alive. I want her. But mixed in, like toxic spices, were his own tells, Italianized errors. He'd write, I don't give a fango mud, a clean version of a much worse word. He used capisci at the end of a threat. It was a linguistic mess of Mexican Spanish, broken English, and angry Italian. It was Marco Moretti, unfiltered. He wasn't just funding the hit, he was coordinating it, right here, in Anthony's email drafts. I saved the entire chain to a secure drive. The sounds outside had quieted. The pops and booms had stopped. There was just silence, a heavy, dreadful silence that lasted for 1 minute, 2 minutes. My breath was trapped in my lungs. Was he alive? Was Franco? The locking mechanism on the vault door whirred. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the heaviest thing I could find, the dead laptop, and raised it over my head, my good arm screaming in protest. The door swung open. It was Luca. He was standing in the dark hallway, framed by the white light of the panic room. He was covered in something. Dust, debris. His hair was matted. His perfect black sweater was torn at the shoulder, and there was a dark, wet stain across his shirt and on his hands. It wasn't his. He was breathing hard, but he was standing. He looked elemental, like a force of nature that had just weathered a storm. Nora, he breathed. I lowered the laptop, shaking so hard I could barely stand. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning me, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No, I whispered. You're bleeding. It's not mine, he said, his voice flat. He looked past me at the laptop. What did you find? I found him, I said, my voice trembling. I found Marco. This was the truth. This was the moment I stopped being a civilian. I had seen the reports, the numbers, the data. Now, I was seeing the result. The man in front of me was a man who lived and breathed a violence I had only read about. He was a protector and a predator, and the two were so tangled up I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And God help me. I had never felt safer in my life. Bring it, he said. We walked out of the panic room. The suite was a disaster. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. The floor-to-ceiling windows were a spider web of fractured glass. 2 of Luca's men were there, weapons still drawn. Franco was cuffing Anthony. The accountant was on his knees, sobbing hysterically, a dark stain on the front of his pants. He was in the server room, Franco spat, trying to wipe the drives. No, he made me, Anthony wept. He made me. They dragged him into the study, which was somehow untouched, and threw him into a chair. He's a liability, boss, Franco said, his voice cold. He opened the door. He let them in. He's compromised. Let me end this. It's cleaner. Cleaner. The word hit me like a slap. They were going to eliminate him. A broken, terrified man who had been blackmailed. No. The word was out of my mouth before I could think. Both men turned to look at me. Nora, this is not your concern, Luca said, his voice gentle but firm. It is, I insisted, stepping forward, and I was shaking, but I didn't care. You can't. If you handle him, if he disappears, how does that look to your captains? Marco will just say you're silencing a rival. He'll say Anthony found your corruption and you had him removed. You'll be the traitor. You'll have a civil war on your hands. Franco glared at me. She's wrong, boss. He's a loose end. She's right, Lucas said, his eyes fixed on me. She's 100% right. It's not enough to win the fight. We have to win the argument. So what do we do? Franco demanded. We have the emails. They're digital, I said, my mind racing, the adrenaline making me sharp. Marco will say they're fake. He'll say I manufactured them. He'll say I'm the infiltrator. You need something they can't deny. You need his voice. You need a confession. He'll never confess, Lucas said, running a bloody hand through his hair. He will, I said, my heart hammering. He will to me. They both stared at me. He wants me, I said, the memory of his greasy appraisal making my skin crawl. He called me your softness, your weakness. He thinks I'm the one who's making you weak. I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment. So let's use it, I proposed. Let's prove him right when you'll relocate me, not to a fortress like this, but to a soft target, a nice, quiet house somewhere with thin security, just thin enough for him to think he can get to me. Absolutely not, Lucas said, his voice a low growl. The commander was gone, and the man who had held my gaze while I bandaged his hand was back. I will not put you in the line of fire. I will not use you as bait. You're not using me. Luca, I am volunteering. This is my skill. This is my weapon. My weapon is language, and his is arrogance. He'll come for me, or he'll call me. He'll want to gloat. He'll want to threaten me. And when he does, I'll have him. We will record every single word. She's crazy, man, Franco said, but he was watching Luca, not me. He saw the logic. She's right, I pushed, walking closer to Luca. You said it yourself. He's offering your routes, your schedules, to the cartel. This isn't just about your family anymore. This is about them. They will not stop. He has to be exposed, publicly, in front of your captains, with proof that is absolute and undeniable. Luca stared at me, his face a mask of warring emotions. I could see the battle in his eyes, the cold calculation of the boss versus the protective instinct of the man. He was responsible for his entire organization, for hundreds of lives, and he was responsible for me. He looked at Franco. He looked at the weeping, broken form of Anthony Ricci. He looked back at me, his gaze lingering on my face, my splinted wrist. Finally, he closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them, the man was gone. The boss was back. Franco, he ordered, find me a house. Glass walls, visible from the street, minimal manpower footprint. We'll wire the whole place. Every phone, every light fixture. He turned to me, his jaw set like iron. You'll have your chance, Nora. He looked at his team, then back at me. A silent, terrible understanding passing between us. There's no cleaner way. The new safe house wasn't safe. It was a trap, and I was the cheese. Luca had called it the glass house. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture, perched on the edge of the Chicago River, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made up 3 of its 4 walls. It was designed to be seen, which was exactly the point. Our intel says Marco has community cameras in this sector, Franco had explained during the briefing, his voice all business. He's using a private surveillance network. He'll be watching. So, I did what I was told. I paced. For 2 hours, I walked back and forth in the living room, a glass of water in my hand, my silhouette sharp and clear against the interior lights. I made myself a target. I wore the same silk pajamas I'd woken up in after the attack, a signal of vulnerability. My splinted wrist was visible. I looked like a woman under duress, moved in a hurry, protected by a thin security detail. But I wasn't alone. Outside, in the November darkness, Franco's team was invisible, 20 men dressed in black, hidden in the landscaping, on the rooftops of adjacent buildings, and in a utility van parked 2 blocks down. They had formed a perfect, inescapable perimeter. The order is capture alive, Luca had told his men. His voice was iron. I want them conscious. I want them to talk, and I want them to listen. Every escape route was blocked. The river was being monitored by a boat disguised as a city maintenance vessel. The streets in and out were choked. I had a tiny earpiece, my only link to the command center where Luca and Franco were watching a dozen monitors. "He's watching," Franco's voice whispered in my ear, making me jump. "The feed from his network just focused. He's taking the bait. Stay visible." My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my throat. I was an interpreter. I sat in quiet hospital rooms. Now, I was a lure in a mob war, my life dangling on the arrogance of a man I despised. "Target is mobile," Franco's voice came again, clipped and low. "A single vehicle, moving your way, 3 blocks out." I forced myself to walk to the window, to look out at the dark water, act natural, look scared. That last part wasn't hard. "He's not in the vehicle," Franco said. "He's smart, he's hanging back, but he's close. He wants a front row seat." A different team, Luca's personal detail, was assigned to Marco himself. "We stop his car the second the assault team moves." Luca had ordered, "Pin him." I heard a new sound, a faint click from the back of the house, not the front door, the kitchen terrace. "They're here," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I hear them." We see them?" Franco replied. 6 of them on foot from the north. They've cut the local power. Stand by. Nora, do not move from the center of the room." The lights in the house clicked off, plunging me into the same terrifying darkness as the high-rise. But this time, I was expecting it. This time, I was part of the plan. Through the glass, I saw them, 6 shadows, moving low and fast across the lawn. They didn't bother with the door. They used a glass cutter. A faint screech, and then a thud as a huge pane of glass was lifted away. They filed in, 6 men in dark tactical gear, weapons raised. "We have them," Franco's voice said. "All 6 are inside. The trap is sprung. Wait, stand by." The lead gunman stopped. He raised his hand, and all 6 men froze. He was looking at his phone. "What is it?" I whispered, frozen in place. "He's texting them." Franco's voice was tight with excitement. "Marco, he's texting his team. The number, it's ending in 1776. It's his personal phone. We've got it. Nora, we've got the direct line proof the car is being stopped. Now." The lead gunman looked up from his phone. He saw me. He raised his weapon. "Hit it!" Franco roared. The world exploded. It wasn't gunfire. It was sound and light. 2 flashbang grenades, thrown by Franco's men from concealed positions inside the house, detonated simultaneously. The blast was deafening, a physical blow that threw me to the floor. The flash was so white-hot it burned spots into my vision even with my eyes closed. Shouts, the thud of bodies, the zip-tie cuffs being pulled tight. It was chaos. It was professional. A hand grabbed my good arm. "Got her?" I was hauled to my feet and practically thrown into a small, steel-lined room I hadn't even known was there. Another panic room. The door slammed shut, and the noise of the takedown was cut in half. I was alone for less than 30 seconds before the door opened again. It was Franco. His face was grim, but his eyes were victorious. "It's done," he said. "All 6 are secured, no fatalities. Just as the boss ordered, Marco is in custody, 3 blocks away. He never knew what hit him." He offered me a hand. "It's time, Nora. We have a meeting to attend." The council met in the reinforced basement of one of Luca's legitimate businesses, a high-end Italian restaurant in River North. The room was a concrete bunker disguised as a wine cellar. 24 captains and lieutenants, the core of the Moretti family, sat around a massive, dark wood table. The air was thick with smoke, fear, and suspicion. Luca sat at the head of the table, his face carved from ice. I was seated in a chair just behind his right shoulder, out of sight but able to hear everything. "We were attacked," Luca began, his voice calm, filling the room. "Twice. An attempt on my life, and a full-scale assault on my residence. This was not an outside job." Whispers erupted. "Silence," Franco barked, standing. "We have the man who opened the door." 2 guards dragged Anthony Ricci in. He was a wreck, his face pale and slick with sweat. He collapsed into the chair they put him in. "Anthony," Franco said, his voice deceptively gentle, Tell them what you told us." Anthony's confession was pathetic. He wept as he spoke of his gambling debts, the bookie, the blackmail. He confessed to opening the back doors, to authenticating the shell companies. "It was Marco," he finally wailed. "He made me. He threatened my kids. He told me to use the code." The room exploded, shouts of liar and traitor. "He's a rat," a captain shouted. "He'd say anything to save his own skin." "My cousin," Marco's voice boomed from the doorway. He was flanked by two of Luca's guards, but he was not in cuffs. He walked in like he owned the place, that oily smile fixed on his face. He makes a mess, and then he blames me. This is what our family has come to. He turned his poisonous charm on the room. And this accountant, who did he confess to? To Franco, to the bossor? He pointed a finger directly at me, hidden in the shadows, to her. He stepped toward the light, revealing me. "This is the source of our rot, this woman. She's a nobody, a civilian. She whispers in his ear. And suddenly, our boss forgets who he is. He turns soft. He lets a woman into our affairs. He's weak, and because he is weak, he imagines conspiracies. He blames his own blood." Half the men at the table were nodding. I could feel the tide turning. They were old world. They didn't trust me. I was the outsider. Marco was blood. "You're right, Marco," I said, my voice shaking, but I stood up. I walked out of the shadows and stood next to Luca's chair. Every eye in the room was on me. "You're right," I repeated, my voice stronger now. "I am a civilian. I'm not blood. I'm just a linguist. I don't know your rules, but I know language. I know numbers. And I know a contract when I see one." I placed my laptop on the table and turned the screen toward the captains. "You're right," Marco sneered. "He's weak. He's hiding behind a woman's skirts." "No," I said, hitting a key. The document projected onto the wall behind Luca. He was just waiting for the proof. "This is the proof you all missed while you were busy worrying about softness." The room went dead silent. On the screen was a document written in Spanish, a preliminary agreement. "I found this in the email drafts Marco used to coordinate the attack," I said, my voice clear and precise, like I was in a hospital, translating a diagnosis. "It's a signed agreement, a memorandum of understanding, between Marco Moretti and two lieutenants of the Reynosa cartel." I could hear men stop breathing. Marco wasn't just skimming. "Gentlemen, he was selling you out. In exchange for their support in removing Luca, he was ceding 3 of your primary port routes. He was giving them full access to the docks." I hit another key. A new document appeared. "And this is the appendix. It's your security schedule. The one for next month. Names, dates, routes, your men." He gave it to them. He was going to let a cartel walk in and take over, and he was going to help them do it. I looked directly at Marco. His smile was gone. His face was white, bloodless. He was staring at the wall, at his own signature. "He didn't just try to kill his cousin," I said, my voice dropping. "He tried to kill all of you." The silence stretched for a full 10 seconds. Then the captain, who had first called Anthony a rat, stood up. He looked at Marco with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You brought them into our house," he whispered. "Traitor!" another man roared, slamming his fist on the table. In an instant, the entire room was on its feet, a single wave of fury directed at one man. Marco looked at Luca, his arrogance finally shattered, replaced by a cold, primal fear. "Luca, cousin, please," he stammered. Luca raised one hand. The room fell silent. He didn't look at Marco. He looked at the captains, one by one. "The vote," Luca said, his voice quiet, "for the charge of high treason against the family, to exclude all in favor." Every single man, including Franco, raised his hand. "Aye." 100%, Franco said, his voice flat. Luca finally stood and turned to face his cousin. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the wine coolers. "Marco Moretti," Luca said, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was not a brother, not a cousin speaking. It was a judge. "By the unanimous vote of this council, you are found guilty. You are hereby and forever excised from this family. Your name will not be spoken. Your assets are forfeit." "Luca, no, you can't," Marco begged, taking a step back as the guards grabbed his arms. "I can," Luca said. "As for your sentence, you betrayed our laws. You betrayed our blood, so you will be dealt with by our laws." He nodded to the guards. "Take him. Hand him over for the traditional rites." He didn't say what that meant. He didn't have to. Off screen, as I had told myself. As the guards dragged a screaming, pleading Marco Moretti from the room, a collective sigh of relief and grim finality filled the air. Luca turned back to the table. He looked at me, just a brief flicker of his eyes. It was a look of gratitude, of debt, and of a terrible, shared understanding. The war was over. The cost was absolute. After the guards dragged a shrieking Marco from the wine cellar, the heavy silence he left behind was almost as loud as his betrayal. The captains, their faces pale and set, looked at Luca, waiting. The fire was out now. The damage assessment began. Anthony Ricci was still huddled in his chair, a weeping, broken man. Franco stepped forward, his face hard. "Boss, we still have this one. He's a security risk, a coward. He can't be trusted." The implication was clear, cleaner, the word I had fought against before. I saw Anthony flinch, bracing for the judgment. I looked at Luca, and he was watching me, his expression unreadable. He was giving me the floor, testing me, or perhaps showing his captains that my counsel mattered. "He's right," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the concrete room. "He is a risk, and he's a coward." Anthony looked at me, his eyes wide with betrayal. "But," I continued, turning to the captains, "his cowardice is the only reason we're alive. He was blackmailed with his family. He didn't act out of greed, like Marco. He acted out of fear, a fear any man here with a child understands." I saw a few of the older men nod, their expressions softening just a fraction. "He's useless to you now," I said, turning back to Luca. "He's compromised, but handling him, as Franco puts it, sends a message that you punish fear the same way you punish treason, that there is no room for human error. That's Marco's way, not yours." I looked at Anthony. He has children. Luca, he's not a soldier. He's an accountant. Luca watched me for a long moment, then turned to the broken man. "Anthony Ricci," Luca said, his voice resonating with authority. "You are stripped of all titles and access. Your accounts are frozen. You will be relocated, you and your family, to a place of my choosing. You will be watched, always. You will work a job I provide. You will live quietly, and you will never, ever return to Chicago. Your life is forfeit, but I am sparing it. For your children." Anthony collapsed, sobbing with a desperate, guttural relief. Thank you, boss." "This," Luca said, looking at his captains, "is the price of a mistake. This is the lesson. Do not confuse it with mercy." The guards lifted Anthony to his feet and took him away. The lesson was clear. Treason gets a death sentence, but weakness gets a life sentence. Luca turned back to the table. The tension was still high. Order had to be restored. "The attack failed," Luca said, "because of loyalty and because of intelligence. Franco, who had been glaring at the space where I stood, snapped to attention. For your service, for your clear-headedness, and for your unwavering loyalty in the face of internal rot," Luca announced, "you are effective immediately, my official underboss." A murmur of approval went around the room. It was the right move. Franco was hard, but he was respected. He inclined his head. "Boss, I'm honored." "But he is not the only one who deserves acknowledgement," Luca said, his voice cutting through the congratulations. He turned. He looked directly at me. The entire room of 24 hardened men turned with him. I felt like a bug under a microscope. "This is Nora Quinn," Luca said, his voice loud and clear. "She's not one of us. She's a civilian, brought into this by chance. She owed us nothing. But when our systems failed, when our eyes were blind, she saw the truth. She analyzed the data. She found the source of the rot. She, and she alone, provided the evidence that stopped a war. She saved this family." He walked over to me, stopping just a foot away. He was not just speaking to his men. He was speaking to me. "In the name of my father, and his father before him, this family is in your debt," he said. He bowed his head, just a fraction of an inch, a simple, profound gesture. I had never felt so powerful or so terrified in my entire life. I was no longer an outsider. I was endorsed, and in this world, that was a shield as strong as steel. 2 days later, I was sitting in a quiet, sunlit restaurant in Lincoln Park. It was one of Luca's, I knew. The smiling manager was one of his guards. The only other patrons were 2 couples who looked suspiciously like they knew how to handle themselves. It was the safest public place in Chicago. Ava walked in, her face a mask of anger and worry. She spotted me in the corner booth and her step faltered. "Nora?" she said, sliding into the booth. She looked me over the splint on my wrist, the fading bruise on my cheek, the exhaustion under my eyes. "My God, what happened to you?" "Ava, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" she hissed, her voice low. "I was terrified. Nora, I thought you were dead. I was angry, but I was so scared. Corporate security issue? What the hell was it?" I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't say mafia, cartel, or assassination, but I couldn't lie to her anymore, not to her face. "I told you I was analyzing documents for an insurance firm," I started, my good hand twisting a napkin. "It was a side job." "And it wasn't an insurance firm. It was a holding company for a very powerful family." "Okay," she said, narrowing her eyes. "I found something, an irregularity, a massive, multi-million-dollar irregularity. I didn't know what it was. I flagged it." "Nora, what did you do?" "I saved a man's life," I whispered, the memory of the truck hitting me. The same night. I didn't know who he was. It turns out he was the man they were trying to frame, the one they were stealing from. And the irregularity I found, it was connected to them, to the people who tried to kill him. "Kill him," she breathed, her face going pale. I was a witness to both things, the data and the attempt. I became a liability. They had to protect me. The man I saved, his security. So these last few days have been intense. They had to find the people responsible. I had to help them. I was the only one who understood the data trail, and we found them. It's over now. I'm safe. Ava stared at me for a full minute. She knew me. She knew I was a terrible liar, and she knew I was holding back 90% of the story. She saw the truth in the part I did tell. "This man you saved," she said slowly, "the powerful one. He's the reason you're sitting in a restaurant that feels like a fortress, isn't he? He's the one who sent that town car to pick me up." I nodded. "Nora," she sighed, reaching across the table and touching my splint, "you always pick the complicated ones. Are you okay, really?" "I am now." "And are you going back to your old life, to the hospital?" I looked down. "I don't think I can." Ava's eyes filled with a sad understanding. "I don't like this. Nora, it scares me. You're in a world I don't get, but you're alive, and you're still you." She squeezed my hand. "I'm still here, but if you ever ghost me like that again, powerful man or not, I will kill you myself." I laughed, a real laugh, and the knot of tension in my chest eased for the first time in a week. I had one foot, at least, still in the real world. The next evening, I was back in the high-rise suite. The first one, it felt like a lifetime ago. Luca had asked to meet me there. He wasn't dressed as the boss. He was in jeans and a dark gray Henley. The bandage on his hand was gone, leaving a raw, red scar across his knuckles. "How was your meeting?" he asked, handing me a glass of wine. "It was okay. She's scared and angry, but she's still my friend." "You're lucky," he said, looking out the window. "Friends like that are rare. In my world, they're non-existent." We stood in silence, the city glittering below us. The cleanup is almost done," he said. "We've audited the entire system. Your linguistic analysis, it flagged 2 more internal risks. We've shut down all the back doors, replaced every vendor Marco ever touched. We're secure. Good, I said. So, I'm free to go. Then, the 72 hours are long over. He turned to face me. You are? I gave you my word. I have a car waiting downstairs. It can take you anywhere you want to go. A new apartment, a new city. I'll fund it. Whatever you need to start over, it's yours. My debt to you is significant. I looked at him. Go. Leave. Go back to my old life. The debt, the grind, the constant fear of my mother's next medical bill. It felt hollow. And what if I don't want to go? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. A flicker of something not surprise, but hope passed through his eyes. I was hoping you'd say that, he said. Marco's betrayal. His deal with the cartel, it was a wake-up call. My father ran this family with an iron fist. I've tried to run it with a scalpel, but I've been balancing. 1 foot in the old world, 1 in the new. Marco proved that's not possible. The old world, it's just poison. He stepped closer. I want to go legitimate, Nora. 100%, the logistics, the restaurants, the real estate. I want to build something that lasts, something that isn't this. That's a nice speech, Luca, but you can't just go legit. That's not how your world works. Not overnight, but I can start and I can clean my own house. And I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't impressed by the money or afraid of the reputation, someone who just sees the data, someone who sees the truth. He held my gaze. I'm offering you a job. Nora, a real one. Strategic advisor, head of international contracts and compliance. You'd report only to me. You'd have the power to audit any vendor, any partner. You'd have veto power over any agreement you find shadowy. My heart was pounding. He was offering me everything, power, security, a purpose. And him, I have conditions, I said. He nodded. I expected nothing less. 1, I am an independent contractor. I am not an employee. I am not family. My judgment stays my own. Agreed. 2, I have the right to withdraw at any time for any reason, no questions, no persuasion. If I say I'm done, I'm done. Agreed, he said, his voice tighter. 3, I took a deep breath. This was the line. My work, my analysis, my authority, it only applies to your legitimate businesses, the ones on the books. I will not be accessory to anything else. I will not vet your security operations. I will not launder anything. My line is absolute. No violence. No crime. If I see it, I walk. Do you understand? He was silent for a full minute, his eyes searching mine. I was asking him to split himself in 2, to build a wall between his light and his dark, and to let me live only on one side. Your conditions, he said finally, are accepted. I swear on my father's name, I will never, ever ask you to cross that line. He held out his hand, not as a boss, not as a lover, as a partner. I took it, my good hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. So, I said, letting out a shaky breath, where do we start? We start, he said, a small smile touching his lips for the first time, by cleaning the supply chain for the restaurant group. I suspect my produce vendor has been inflating his invoices. I smiled back. I've seen his invoices. His use of the semicolon is appalling. We worked for hours, sitting at the dining table, laptops open, the city lights spreading out before us. It was easy. It was normal. As the first hint of gray light touched the sky, we stood on the balcony, the cold November air biting at our faces. I'm still afraid, I whispered, not looking at him. I know, he said, his voice a low rumble beside me. This world, it's not kind. It's not safe. I can't promise you it will be. I know. He turned, taking my face in his hands. His scarred knuckles were rough against my skin, but his touch was incredibly gentle. But I can promise you this, he murmured, his dark eyes fixed on mine. You will never be alone in it again. He leaned in. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled moment in the suite. This was slow. This was a choice. His lips brushed mine, hesitant, asking a question. I leaned into him, my good hand coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart, and I kissed him back. It wasn't a kiss of sparks and fire. It was a kiss of anchor and harbor. It was the feeling of a 72-hour free fall finally, terrifyingly, touching solid ground. We had chosen, and we were ready for the consequences. 6 months, 180 days. That's how long it had been since I'd stood in a wine cellar and watched a man's life be erased by a unanimous vote. Today, I was standing in a different kind of room, a boardroom. It was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower, overlooking the Loop. It was one of the legitimate businesses, Moretti Global Logistics. The numbers are clear, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the large, quiet room. I pointed my good hand, my left wrist now, just a memory of a sprain at the projection on the wall. The invoices from the Antwerp distributor are inflated, not by much, just 3%. But look at the linguistic markers. I clicked to the next slide. Notice the inconsistent capitalization of freightage, and here, the use of a comma splice, where his previous 3 years of invoices were perfect. He's padding the fuel surcharge, and he's getting sloppy because he's nervous. He's skimming. Franco DeSantis, now officially underboss, sat at the long table. He wasn't glaring at me anymore. He was taking notes. 3%, like one of the captains muttered, it's the cost of business. It was, I corrected him, turning to face the table, under the old way, but that 3% over 1 year is nearly $1 million. That's $1 million you're letting him steal. I looked at Luca, who sat at the head of the table, his face impassive. He gave me a single, imperceptible nod. Or, we terminate the contract, I said, and we engage the backup vendor from Rotterdam, the one we vetted last month. This was the new order, the new discipline. In the 6 months since Marco's removal, Luca had moved with surgical precision. He had used the attempted coup as a mandate for absolute change. He hadn't just expanded the legitimate businesses. He had actively and ruthlessly pruned the parts of the family that lived in the shadows, captains who resisted the new transparency, who were too deep in the old world rackets, were retired, they were cut off, their territories dissolved. He was consolidating, cleaning house, and he was using my skills as the mop. My journey here had been a free fall. I'd gone from a passerby on a rainy street, just trying to pay my mom's medical bills, to a witness, a victim. I'd become a piece of evidence, then a strategic asset, the intellectual weapon that had won the war. Now, sitting at this table, vetoing a multi-million-dollar contract while the family's underboss took my notes. I was something else. I was a partner. After the meeting, I stepped outside, the wind off the lake whipping my hair. I pulled my phone from my bag, my own phone. No longer a secure burner. My first call was to my mother. "Nora, sweetie, the doctors here are just wonderful," she gushed, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "How was the follow-up, Mom?" "Oh, just perfect. They said the new medication regimen is working wonders. This Dr. Jensen at the Mayo Clinic, honey. I don't know how you afforded this insurance, but he's a miracle worker." My stomach did a familiar little flip. I hadn't afforded it. Luca had. One phone call, and my mother was in the care of the best cardiologists in the country. Her bills simply vanished. They never arrived at her house, or mine. It was the one part of his power I had accepted without condition. He never mentioned it. He never visited her. He never imposed. He just handled it. He stood in the background, a silent, powerful guardian, and let me take the credit. It was, in its own way, the most profound act of care I had ever known. "I'm glad, Mom," I said, smiling. "Just do what the miracle worker says, okay?" I hung up, my heart full. My old life, the constant grinding panic about money and medicine was gone. My new life, however, was just as demanding. I wasn't just vetting contracts. I was building. The next afternoon, I was at the University of Chicago, not as a student, but as a guest lecturer. My old forensic linguistics professor had invited me to speak. I was also under the guise of an anonymous corporate donor courtesy of the Moretti Real Estate Division, funding a new research program into cross-linguistic forensics in corporate fraud. It was my anchor. It was my connection to the world I'd left behind and a way to build my own legitimate power base. But my real project, the one that took up most of my time, was internal. "Look at the phrasing again," I said, pointing to a screen. I was in a training room at the logistics headquarters. In front of me were 5 new hires. They were all young, sharp, with master's degrees in finance and accounting. They were the first class of Luca's new internal compliance division, my division. "He doesn't say we guarantee delivery," I explained. "He says we project delivery. It's a non-binding term. It's a legal escape hatch. You don't just read the numbers. You have to read the words." I was teaching them my craft. I was training my own team of forensic text analysts. I was making myself, and my skill set, a permanent, structural part of the Moretti organization. I was creating the very ethics I had demanded. That night, I returned to the penthouse. It was my home now. I'd kept my old apartment for a month. A symbolic tether, but I'd never slept there. Luca was home, standing by the vast windows, looking down at the city. The scar on his knuckles had faded, but it was still there, a reminder. "Good class?" he asked, not turning. "They're smart," I said, kicking off my heels. "They're learning. Give them another 6 months and they'll be better at this than I am." "I doubt that," he murmured. He turned, a glass of water in his hand. He looked tired. "Franco got a feeler today," he said, and my stomach tightened. "From Reynosa, the cartel." I didn't flinch. I just walked to the bar and poured my own glass of water. What did they want? To reopen discussions. They see the old guard is gone. They see our profits from logistics are up over 20%. They see a clean, efficient operation. And they want in. They're offering a clean partnership. "There's no such thing," I said. "I know." He watched me. This was a test. He wasn't just informing me, he was conferring. "What did you tell Franco?" I asked. "I told him to send them a gift." "A gift?" "A copy of the fully executed, signed contract Marco made with their rivals. The one you found, the one that detailed his plan to double-cross them after he'd finished with me. I also sent along the audio file of Marco offering their territory to the captain from the docks." I processed this. The insurance policy Franco and I had built from the evidence. "You're reminding them that you have proof they were conspiring against their own allies." "I'm reminding them," Luca said, a cold, hard edge in his voice, "that I have the power to start a war within their own organization, and I can do it from my living room with a single email. I am reminding them that my shadow is longer than theirs." It was mutually assured destruction, built on forensic linguistics. It was a cold, brutal, and bloodless peace. "They'll back off," I said. "For now." "Yes." He let out a long breath, the tension leaving his shoulders. The shadow was always there, but we had learned how to manage it. He walked over to me, taking the glass from my hand. "You've been working for 6 months. Nora, you've rebuilt my entire organization. You look exhausted." "It's good work," I said. "It is, but I'm scheduling a vacation." I raised an eyebrow. "A vacation?" 2 weeks in Italy. We leave at the end of the month." My heart did a strange little jump. Italy. "Milan for 3 days. I have to meet with the new partners at the shipping exchange, the ones you vetted." "Ah, so a work trip." "For 3 days," he corrected me, a small smile touching his lips. "And then 11 days in Naples and the coast. No phones, no meetings, no invoices." It sounded impossible, like a dream. "Just us?" I asked, my voice soft. "Just us," he confirmed, "and 2 men, discreet. They'll be a block away at all times, but they will be there." I looked at him. That was the reality. That was the choice. A trip to Naples, but with a security detail. A beautiful life. Lived inside a fortress. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a trade. "I think I can live with that," I said. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony, the same one where we'd made our agreement. The November chill was back, but it felt different now. I thought about the woman who had sprinted across a rain-slicked street, desperate and in debt. I thought about the terrified witness in the vault, the analyst who found the pattern, the woman who stood before a council of killers and didn't back down. I wasn't that person anymore. I was all of them, and none of them. My love for Luca, it hadn't cleaned him. It hadn't erased his past, or mine. He was still the boss. He was still a man who lived by a code I would never fully understand. A man who had solved problems in ways I didn't let myself think about. But our love hadn't cleaned his past. It had ignited his future. It had given him a reason to build a new discipline. I hadn't made him a good man, but I had given him the tools and the reason to build a good life, a legitimate one. He slid the glass door open, stepping out into the cold with me. He didn't speak, just wrapped his arms around me from behind, pulling my back against his chest, his chin resting on my head. We didn't need the words. We had contracts, we had balance sheets, we had a shared, complex, and dangerous understanding. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the endless grid of lights, a billion different lives all running in parallel. I had made my choice. I had stepped out of my simple, predictable line and into his. It was a world of gray, of compromise, and of a power I was only just beginning to understand. It was not the life I had planned, but it was the life I had chosen, and I was ready to be responsible for it.